Kings Island is issuing a fear warning for the city of Cincinnati and the surrounding areas. Halloween Haunt will make landfall on September 24th and is expected to induce terror until the 30th of October. All patrons are advised to take caution. Unspeakable horrors are among us, and there's no hope of escape. Halloween Haunt, fear is waiting for you.
Come and get it.
Halloween Haunt admission is included with your Gold Pass or buy a ticket at visitkingsisland.com.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back, everybody, to Wrestling Omakase. It is episode number 237, and this week I am pleased to be joined by a returning guest. Hello, Matt.
Hey, John. Nice to talk to you again.
How you doing today, Matt? What's up?
Doing all right. It's a rainy late October day here where I am, but we had trick-or-treating last night, so got to cross something off the to-do list, and now getting to talk about some WCW, which either I will be very excited for or very depressed by. We shall see.
So you did your trick-or-treating yesterday? Why yesterday?
I don't know why they schedule it the way they do out here in Ohio, but it was decreed from upon high that trick-or-treat is October 28th this year. And so that's when the kids got to go out.
That's interesting, I guess. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, we're not going to send them on Halloween. Going to send them 3 days earlier for some reason.
So it definitely wasn't that way when I was a kid.
No,
and then
I was a kid either.
Right. And then I have a couple kids now, and everywhere we've lived when we've gone trick-or-treating, it's like, all right, here's the trick-or-treat night. And it's almost never Halloween. And I just don't understand why.
Very bizarre. But yeah, so we're back here on Omakase. Before I get into anything else, I want to talk a little bit about the Patreon going on pause, because obviously that, if you haven't been following the site or the Twitter, you would have no idea. So I just want to let everybody know. I put a lengthy post up that kind of went into all of it, but I mean, the bottom line is, I did that Patreon for 17 months, almost a year and a half. And, I had a lot of fun. But, at the same time, it was like when I first started it, right? It was like May of 2020. So you're talking about like basically peak pandemic. I'm home all the time. I have so much free time, and I'm like, I got all these ideas, and I had a blast sharing them with everybody. And I had I think people really enjoyed some of them, especially I think the individual match series we did with Okada Tanahashi and Okada Naito and all that. Actually, no, we didn't do Okada Naito. I'm sorry. Okada Tanahashi. I think we did Okada Tanahashi, Naito Tanahashi, and Naito Ishii. And then the Tokyo Dome main event series, I know people seem to really like a lot too. But like the point is when I started, I had a lot more free time. Now it's like, the world is reopening, especially the US, I guess. And I have, a lot of plans. I have Rangers 10-game season tickets, and by quarter season tickets, I guess they call it, and vacations coming up and all this stuff. And with nobody else to cover for me, right? It's just me, doing the solo content besides the the full episodes we do with guests, it just started to become like more and more of like a burden. Like, okay, how am I going to plan my entire life around being home to record this stuff, especially during these tournaments, which are like, covering. I like covering the G1, on a daily basis, and all these other tournaments I've been covering, but it's a lot of work. So, and on top of that, I am a little burnt out on wrestling in general. I mean, if you follow my personal Twitter account, you've probably noticed a lot more hockey tweets since the hockey season restarted, and a lot less wrestling tweets. And it's just like, I think over a year and a half of these clap crowds in Japan have taken a toll on everybody. Not just me. And that's also probably one of the reasons why the patron count, not that I was very proud of my patron count. I mean, a lot of people on that page, we have a lot more patrons on that Patreon, even towards the end here, around like 50 to 60, than a lot of websites I've seen with a lot, in theory at least, a lot bigger following. So I'm very proud that the Patreon was the success that it was. And I thank everybody that was a patron at any point. But there was a drop. I mean, at one point, we were around 70 patrons, pretty consistently, and then it dropped off to like between 50 and 60, usually closer to 50. And weirdly enough, I got a bunch of signups right after I announced I was going on hiatus, but I guess people really were afraid I was going to yank it down completely and wanted to download stuff. So that was weirdly flattering, I guess. But yeah, I mean, so it was a combination of things. Like, it's obviously, I mean, I'll be upfront. It was making less money, right? Because you have less patrons. It was still if I still had 70 plus patrons, and it was still making an extra like $100, $150 a month, I'd have to think a little harder probably about pulling the trigger and taking this hiatus. But I'm glad it's not, because I really am burnt out. I really do need a break, and that's what we're doing here. So on the technical side of things, so if you're a patron now, you do not have to cancel your subscription. It's automatically suspended. You're not going to be charged on November 1st. As far as I know, and this is, again, I've never had a Patreon put on hiatus before this, but as far as I know, you will continue to have access to the entire archive. So if there's anything you didn't listen to, anything you want to go back and download, it's all up there. So if you're a patron right now, you should have access to the archive indefinitely. You will not be charged the $5 on November 1st. So you can go on there and listen to whatever you want. Obviously, I'm not going to post anything new. So, but you don't have to delete your pledge, quote unquote, because you're not going to get charged every month. If you're not a patron and you really want to go back and listen to some of those archives, like I mentioned, all the Tokyo Dome series and all that, you can sign up for the $5 still. It's still at patreon.com/Wrestling Omakase. I'm not going to plug it every week anymore, and I'm not going to put it in the description, but you can sign up. You have to pay the $5, but again, the same thing as the existing patrons, you'll not be charged at the beginning of the next month. So in other words, you pay your $5 whenever you sign up. You have complete access to the archive. You can listen to I did the entire 1990s for the Tokyo Dome main event. It's actually kind of crazy when I think about it now. Plus all these other tournaments, plus all this other audio on there. So you can always pay the $5 to sign up and get access to the entire archive. And then again, you're not going to be charged on the next month. Now, my plan for now, I'm just going to leave it up there, and I'm going to keep suspending it each month. So again, it'll stay up there. You can stay a patron without paying. Keep access to the entire archive. If and when I decide to bring it back, I think I probably will bring it back. But it will really depend on but it'll just depend. Like, does Japanese wrestling feel exciting again, right? Like, am I excited about Japanese wrestling again? I feel like when the last restrictions are removed and the crowds are allowed to cheer again, and we're allowed to have international travel again, and like New Japan and all these other companies feel exciting again, I think I probably will, get back into it enough to restart the Patreon. But I will give everybody plenty of advance notice. So, let's throwing out a hypothetical here. If I decide to restart it in March 2022, which, is kind of a month I'm thinking about in my head where the New Japan Cup is that month, I could restart with that month. If I decide to restart it in like March 2022, I will tell everybody, like, well before that in February, so you can decide if you're still like signed up at that point, if you want to cancel and not be charged the $5 at the start of March. You'll have plenty of advance notice, so you don't have to worry about that. And I'm not saying I'm going to definitely restart it March 1st, 2022, but you will get the, if I do decide to do it for the following month, you'll get plenty of advance notice. That's my point. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I had a really good time with it, but it's time to take a break, and it's time to like, relax a little bit, and not like, it really was starting to become so much work, especially during tournament season, where like I'm staring down at these upcoming the DDT DO and then the New Japan Best of Super Junior World Tag League schedules. I'm just like, I don't want to do these daily audio on these fucking tournaments. And then on top of that, it became increasingly difficult to find guests sometimes for some of these topics. I mean, there are lots of, a lot of people that I've had as guests in the past are just not watching as much wrestling either, as much Japanese wrestling or any other kind of wrestling. So, it just became increasingly difficult to find guests for a weekly basis. So all of this, by the way, means very little for the free feed. So we're still here recording a free episode. The free Omakase episode on the Voice of Wrestling Network will continue. I'm going to keep it to the same every other week format, though. So basically, obviously, we went to the every other week format because the Patreon episodes were the other week. But as I mentioned, I'm just not as into wrestling right now, right? I'm not watching as much stuff. And as I just said, it's harder to find guests now. So this way, it will really reduce my stress to only have to look for a guest and only look for stuff to cover every other week instead of every week with these full episodes. So yeah, the free feed, if you've never been a patron, if you've only listened to the free feed, really nothing is changing for you. You're still going to get the same Omakase every other week that you've always gotten. If you are a patron, if you've ever been a patron, again, I really thank you for, supporting the podcast and, letting me do all that stuff for all those months. I had a really, really good time doing it most of the time until I got burnt out towards the end. And again, I really appreciate you. And, if we do decide to restart it, I hope you will join me there. That was a lot longer winded than I thought I would go on that. But yeah, if you have any questions, of course, you can always @ me on Twitter, or you can post in the Discord. All those links are in the description. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay. So I talked a long time while poor Matt sat here. Thank you, Matt, for sitting through all that.
Zero problem, John. And I'll just say super quick from a listener perspective, totally enjoyed listening to your Patreon content from day one. It was fantastic. And at the same time, totally understand why you're stepping back. Without even doing a podcast, I have been largely burnt out from wrestling recently. And just makes total sense. Thank you for all the great content, and glad to see the free content is still going on.
Thank you. And of course, you are here on a WCW Retro Roulette episode because, I guess you're not that into the current wrestling either. But
yeah, actually, I did cut my New Japan World subscription even, which was my last link to current wrestling just this month. I was just like, I just don't really want to watch it that much anymore. I will come back when I'm ready for it. Yeah. But I love New Japan. It's my favorite modern promotion, but just felt like I needed a break from it.
Yeah. I mean, I really, I still obviously watch New Japan. I watched the entire G1. I'm sure I'm going to watch Power Struggle. I've really fallen off big on AEW again. And it's just like, I don't know. It's not like the show is bad. It's obviously not bad, but like, there's just at a certain point it stopped. Like I don't know. The big thing right now is the Hangman Page thing, right? And I don't have the connection to him that I think a lot of people do. It's not. I like him, but like I'm not like dying to see him win the world title or anything. And it really hit me when I was thinking about like I felt nostalgic, right? I was tweeting about the other day. Like I felt very nostalgic for like the 2015 to like 2018 period of New Japan, or 2016 to 2018 period of New Japan, which I didn't always love in real time. But when I thought about it, it's like it really feels like what we're missing from, when New Japan was the dominant promotion of this circle, I guess you would say, of fandom, like our circle of wrestling Twitter and all that, versus today, was like, it really, really felt super important as far as who was IWGP champion, like who was on top of New Japan, and it felt like you had factions, and they were like so super into their guy, like the Naito and LIJ people, obviously ride or die for Naito, the Okada people ride or die for Okada, the Omega elite people were just fucking super ride or die for, for him and for them, and it just felt like everybody was constantly like, maybe some people didn't like that, maybe they thought it was too cliquey. But I really enjoyed that element of it where like everybody was like super into their guy and they were like, fuck everybody else. I want to see my guy as the champion. I want to, their reign is the only one that matters, that kind of thing. And now it just feels like AEW, I don't know, like everybody likes everything, right? And it's just kind of like, it never feels like you have those kind of cliques or that kind of intra fan base conflict. And like, maybe the closest thing you have to it is like Cody versus anti-Cody people, right? Maybe that's the closest thing you have. But even that really never feels like it gets that heated. And like everything instead is about like AEW versus WWE. What's the ticket sales like? And the demo numbers. And, I'm sure some people find that really interesting, but I'm not one of them. And it really, it's really just kind of gotten so boring on like trying to like following that along on Twitter and everything. So I think that's really hurt my enjoyment of the promotion and of wrestling in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I also have just not fully gone into AEW. I think it's a fine product. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to criticize it, but just have never found it engaging enough to pull me away from everything else I have going on in life regularly. And I hadn't thought about what you said about like peak New Japan until you mentioned it the other day. And I was like, man, there is a lot of truth to that. Like, you just don't have that same discussion today anymore about AEW or New Japan or really anywhere. And I think it extended beyond just the upper card or main event scene in New Japan as well. I mean, the way the discourse, the way we used to talk about Ishii or Goto or the junior heavyweight division, like, there was just lots of, at least for me, enjoyable conversation going around the product, and people had different perspectives, but it was a good conversation. And like you said, it seems like, unfortunately, most of the wrestling discourse now is around AEW versus WWF or WWE, excuse me, at least in our circle. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I'm all for WWF falling to the wayside and somewhat overtaking them, but also I just don't care about that conversation in the least. It's not something I personally find interesting.
It's just so repetitive too. It's like the same shit every time. I don't know. Like it feels way more repetitive to me than any other discussion we've seen in wrestling at this point. But
yeah, and it's not only repetitive, but because of the TV nature of both products, you know exactly what discussion point is coming up based off of what day it is. It's like, oh, today's a ratings day. This is what everyone's going to be talking about, and da-da-da. And it's like, I guess that conversation's fine the first or second time around, but after that, what else is there to say in an interesting way?
Yeah. So I don't know. That's just that's my take. And I'm not really surprised that do you agree, given that you also seem like burnt out on current wrestling, but like, the AEW shit and the AEW versus WWE shit, like it's just so like the gravitational pull of it, right? It just like really feels like it's really tough to escape from. And
it is.
I think that has a lot to do with how I feel about wrestling right now. But
yeah, no, I agree. And like you said earlier, I think a lot of people that have, watched some of the promotions I watched more have also stopped watching, or they are now pulled into that, as you so well put it, the gravitational pull of WWE versus AEW. And so those same people really aren't talking about New Japan or Stardom or other promotions anymore. And it's just, it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, it'd be one thing if like I said, like if AEW just replaced it in a way where like you had a similar kind of discussion, but it feels like the only things people ever have to say about AEW is like, demo number, or like I don't know, like this ridiculous like overpraise of everything they do. And I'm not trying to sound like I hate AEW, but like I don't know, like you will log on and you will see people tweet like, Kenny Omega is the genius of our times, and it's because he like didn't tag in Adam Cole because he's a Ghostbuster and Adam Cole's a ghost. It's like, okay, like come on. I get the joke, but like, why do we have to act like he's fucking doing Mozart? And like, or they'll be like, oh, well, this is the greatest interview I've ever seen. And it's like MJF like making fun of the fans for being stinky or something. It's like, I don't know, like everybody is just so happy to have an Major League American promotion that's not WWE. They go so overboard on the praise level, which it just really that does turn me off too. It's like it feels like there's no room to ever be critical of it, and that element did not exist. In like New Japan 2018, you could be very critical.
Yes,
yeah, you could be very critical of it, and you get pushback, and people get mad at you. I mean, I know that very well, but it's not like today, where if you say anything bad about AEW at all, I mean, you get immediately people will be unfollowing you, and you might get quote treated by someone, and they might fucking go off. And it's just like it really makes the vibe of like to me, someone who watches AEW and can be a little more critical about my wrestling in general. It really just makes me not want to engage with it. So
yeah, well, and like I mean, to push your point even further, sometimes it's not even that you're saying something bad. It's like you said, you're just not praising it enough. So it's like, wow, that was a really enjoyable TV match. I don't know, 3.5 stars maybe or something. And people are like, 3.5 stars? What do you mean? And it's like, yeah, it was really enjoyable. I liked it. But that's not good enough for them.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's whatever. I'm not trying to piss anybody's cornflakes. If people think AEW is like the greatest thing of all time, that's cool.
Yeah, people. I'm a big fan of people enjoying what wrestling they like. But I think it just gets back to what you said. For whatever reason, the discourse has changed, and we definitely don't need to explore that today over the past 4 or 5 years or so. And I think having, at least with the people I talk to, there's just less fun and interesting wrestling conversations to have in general. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I totally agree. But we're here today to talk about old stuff. So let's get into that. So this is our second straight year doing a WCW Halloween Havoc Retro Roulette. If you're not familiar with the Retro Roulette concept, it's very simple. So we pick a theme, which in this case is Halloween Havoc. I put all the number of Halloween Havocs into a randomizer to get six different shows. And then from each show, we get a random match. Now, you were not on last year for the Halloween Havoc one. It was Gerard, actually. But you were on, I think, for the Super Brawl earlier this year, right?
Correct.
And then you volunteered for this one before I even... Like, I had the idea, like, I'll probably do a Halloween Havoc Retro Roulette. And you'd, like, DM me before I even asked anybody. You're like,
yeah,
John, if you're doing that, which I appreciate. It makes my life so much easier having to find a guest.
Well, I'll just say to connect the dots. So it was about the week before that or so when I canceled my New Japan subscription. And then I think maybe the day before I DM'd you, I was like, oh, what the hell? I'll watch some old WCW just for giggles.
Yeah.
And I watched some and I really enjoyed it. I was like, I wonder if he'll do a Halloween Havoc episode this year. I'm going to message him. Or they.
Yeah. So this is Halloween Havoc. This is the first time we're doing a repeat one. So we're doing a second Halloween Havoc one. So just to go over the rules a little bit with a repeat one. I didn't take the years that we got last time out of the queue. So we could get the same years as last time. It was fine. But obviously, if we got that year again, then it had to be a different match. Makes sense, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the years we got this time were 1990, 91, 92, 94, 95, and 99. Now, of those years, 90, 91, and 92 are new. We did not get those three last time. 94, 95, and 99 we did get last time. So those had to be a different match. And at least one of them the randomizer tried to give you the same match again, which is kind of funny. The years that we got last time but didn't get this time were 93, 96, and 98. And so far, after doing two of these, we've still never gotten the original Halloween Havoc in 89, the 97 Halloween Havoc, or the year 2000. So of the 12, we've now done 9 of the 12. But there's 3 of them that we've never done, which is 89, 97, and 2000. So the first show we're doing here is, again, we're going in chronological order here. So we got 1990, which was the second Halloween Havoc. This was October 27th from Chicago, Illinois, the UIC Pavilion, I should say. A claimed crowd of 8,000. And the show did a pay-per-view buy rate of 1.33, which I believe would easily be the highest. Yes, I think so. I'm just going through to confirm. I don't know why I checked 1999. Obviously, that one wouldn't be it. But yes, 1.33. It would be the highest of the ones we're covering today. So this show, when I saw the card before I got the random match, obviously, nothing really stood out here to me. It's like, oh, I really hope I get that one. Maybe Stan Hansen against Lex Luger, just because, that was obviously such a rare U.S. match here for Stan Hansen during one of his very brief runs in America. I think that's his last run in America. I think after that 1990, late 1990 WCW run, I think that he never comes back to America. Let me just double check.
I believe you're right.
He gets chased off because WCW. Oh no, okay. He does come. I'm wrong. He does come back in 91 to WCW. So that must be when they chase him off, when they were trying to get him to show up with the what was it, the Desperados or something, like those comedy cowboys. Do you remember those?
I believe yes. No, I believe that is correct. Yes.
Like they were they were basically this group of cowboys. I think it was Dutch Mantel and these two other goofs who were doing these comedy skits where they were looking for Stan Hansen. And the only problem was they didn't tell Stan Hansen. And Stan Hansen didn't want anything, any part of these goofs. So he refused to do the angle. So 91 is the end of his WCW run. It looks like he did a few matches in America in 93 for most notably for the still Eastern Championship Wrestling. And then also for the NWA, the post WCW NWA, I should say. Oh no, that's ECW. Okay. That's because ECW is still NWA. So yeah, those 4 matches for the NWA ECW. And then he did one for something called the Catch Wrestling Association, which is Germany, actually. Yeah, that's the CWA. And then another independent U.S. match, a Terry Funk show against the Big Boss Man. Wow, that'd be something. But yeah, that's it for him in America. After that, for the rest of his career, 94 through 2000, he appears exclusively in Japan. But yeah, there you go. So that would have been fun to get to see one of Stan Hansen's last American runs here. Other than that, I didn't really care. And the match we did get here was for the NWA United States Tag Team titles. The Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott Steiner, defeat the Nasty Boys, Brian Knobbs, and Jerry Sags in 15-24. So this match has a 7.10 average on Cage Match and a 3 3/4 from the Observer at the time. It is for WCW's, I guess, kind of short-lived secondary tag titles. The belts lasted from September of 86. The first champions were the Russians, Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev. They defeated the Kansas Jayhawks, Bobby Jaggers, and Dutch Mantel. That was a tournament final. I do not know anything about 1986 NWA, so may have mispronounced some names there. But yeah, they held the belts, or the belts lasted until the summer of 92. So the final champions, the final WCW US Tag Champions at that point, were Dick Slater and the Barbarian. They defeated Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin on the June 25th episode of Main Event. They made one defense. They beat the team of Flying Brian and the Z-Man. Flying Brian and the Z-Man. That's like the perfect early 90s WCW team. They beat them on June 26th, the next day, for an episode of Worldwide. And then a little over a month later, July 31st, the champs were stripped and the belts were retired, so that apparently the focus could be on the WCW World Tag titles instead. I always like the idea of having like a second set of tag titles, especially one that's like not. I mean, obviously New Japan has the junior tag belts, but just having like a secondary tag belt almost like makes your tag division seem more real or something, right? It's like you're not just fighting over, not just fighting over like the one set of belts, but.
Right.
Anyway.
No, as a big fan of tag team wrestling, I think having that secondary title helps a lot because it forces you to think about the tag division more and set up more programs. And at times, I think it worked really well in WCW. The Midnight Express, primarily, I remember some of their matches and really just working great matches as the champs. I thought, having the Steiner brothers as the U.S. Tag Champs, helped elevate the titles as well. And there were definitely low points for the titles as well as with any title in WCW. But I like the idea and wish it could have stuck around longer.
So the Steiners, they were the 12th champions in history at this point. They won the belts from the Midnight Express August 24th, 1990 at a house show at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. So a building I have been to many times. They would actually never lose those titles. They held them all the way up through April 6, 91. They were stripped by the WCW board of directors on an episode of Pro. So WCW, they stripped them because the Steiners won the World Tag Team titles from the Freebirds on February 8th. So I guess the idea was a team couldn't hold both. I don't know why it took them almost exactly 2 months to come to that decision. Very WCW, but there you go. It ended up being the second longest reign, though, in the short history of these belts. It was 225 days. It only trails the first of 3 Midnight Express reigns, which was 346 days from May 16th, 87 to April 26th, 88. So that's your little bit on the Steiner brothers title reign here. So JR, he is dressed here as like, I don't know, a gangster or something. Was he supposed to be like Dick Tracy?
Yeah, I was just thinking 1920s gangster costume play, which I appreciated so he could still wear the big hat because it's JR.
And then Paul E. Dangerously is Dracula. And he has these fake fangs he has to take out because he can't keep them in his mouth. He's like, what, less than a year or almost exactly a year away from forming the Dangerous Alliance, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's Halloween Havoc 91, yeah. And then Tony Schiavone is dressed up as the Phantom of the Opera, that was the funniest one of the 3. That looked pretty good.
Yeah, I really expected him to take the mask off at some point, but at least all the parts I saw of the show, he was still full costume, fully committed to the character.
The Steiners went right after the Nasty Boys as soon as they hit the ring. So the 2 teams brought out to the floor immediately. And then Scott and Jerry Sags fought back to the ring. They end up on the top rope, and Scott escaped a superplex and then hit him with a huge overhead belly-to-belly suplex off the top there. Quite the start. But and then Paul describes the Nasty Boys as, quote, cool enough to win in Atlantic City and tough enough to walk around the South Bronx with the winnings taped to their foreheads. That was quite the fucking quote. I guess because Atlantic City, obviously, when I grew up, it became known already kind of as like, oh, it's like the lesser version of Vegas, like the rundown one that nobody likes. But like in 1990, like this would have been like right before the Trump Taj Mahal opens, and like it's still considered kind of a big deal, I think. So it's still considered pretty glamorous. So I guess that was the idea there. And plus the Nasty Boys are like, East Coast guys anyway, or New York City guys, but just a great quote. Really good quote from Paul. Scott hits a Tiger Driver on Sags, still pretty early on here. And then he sets him up with a Doomsday Device Bulldog. The crowd's just going absolutely nuts for the Steiners. But the referee was distracted, sort of distracted. He almost turned back too soon and then had to turn back around to yell at Rick some more because he was like, oh, I almost saw the bad thing.
Yeah, I think he did turn around right at the wrong moment and had to give himself whiplash trying to make it look like he did not. But that's besides the point.
But yeah, so the ref does miss Knobs coming in with a chair. He nails Steiner with the chair shot and then gets a 2 count off of that. And the Nasties then work over Scott for a while. Pretty simple stuff. And this is where the match gets a bit boring for me. Scott finally comes back with a belly-to-belly suplex. The Nasties cut him back off again, hit a spike pile driver on Scott. But Rick apparently decides turnabout is fair play. And he nails Sags in the back of the steel chair. So both Scott and Sags are down. And then Sags somehow blades off a chair shot to the back of the head. I have to question the physics on that. I don't really see how that would cause you a cut on the front of your head, but okay. And then he manages to tag out the Knobs, who puts Scott in a very exciting bear hug. And the Nasties just keep cutting Scott off every time he finally looks like he's going to make the hot tag. I really like the New Japan style 15 minutes gone by call from the ring announcer like AEW, they copy a lot of WCW stuff. They should copy that. Because remember, when they did the Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega match, the ring announcer really did a terrible job keeping people updated on the time limit. So, like, you just have to do it in every match. Otherwise, it's very obvious which matches are going to go to the time limit because it's the only ones you're doing it in. Scott finally comes back with a very sloppy clothesline. He makes the hot tag to Rick. Rick cleans house with some much better clotheslines. It's a belly-to-belly suplex on Sags. It breaks down to a 4-man brawl. The Nasty Boys take over again. They toss both Steiners to the floor, but then they celebrate a little early. Rick comes off the top with a double clothesline to both Nasties, and they cut Rick right back off again. And this is where the match really started to feel a bit disjointed to me. They go back to the outside. They slam Scott out there. They keep working over Rick. JR is complaining endlessly about the ref not getting one of the Nasty Boys out of the ring. So some things never change, I guess. Scott and Rick finally come back. They separate the Nasties. They send Sags to the outside. And then Scott hits a very sloppy Frankensteiner that damn near kills Sags. Like, drops him directly down to his head. And that is the pin. The Nasties then attack them after the bell, nail them with the belts, and then we'll get into the post-match after. But I don't know. What do you think of the match itself? I thought, it started out so good that almost where it went from there felt like a massive disappointment to me. Like, it's certainly not a bad match, but it looked like it was going to be awesome from the start, and then just kind of slowed down a lot and became very disjointed towards the end, and then just ended out of nowhere. So I only went 3 stars in this overall. It was fine, but it started out so hot that I was hoping for more. But with the batch of matches we got here, it still ended up being my favorite match, I think. But there you go. Oh, no, I liked one match better. I'm sorry. Did have one match better.
Yeah, so I'll just say up front, I definitely enjoyed this match more than you. I went in with really low expectations. This was not one of the Nasty Boys matches that I remembered actually enjoying from their couple of WCW runs. I believe I probably watched this match once, really hadn't thought about it since. And I really enjoyed it. And I think the hot start, as you said, was just absolutely amazing. The crowd was already hot for the Steiners when they came out. And then starting to match like that just really pulled the audience in. The Nasty Boys control segment was definitely not the most exciting, but I appreciate that they really focused on isolating Scott Steiner and really working on his lower back, even when the moves themselves weren't the most inspiring. Although they did mix in a couple of good moves along with abdominal stretches and things like that. And it did get disjointed at the end, but for me, it was just kind of a enjoyable mixture of a typical Southern tag match with more of a chaotic brawling nature. And so maybe that put me in a more forgiving mood along with my low expectations going into it. And then Rick, just to give him some credit too, not the biggest Rick Steiner fan, but he was fantastic the few times he was in the ring. The Steiner lines he delivered were absolutely vicious. His top rope double clothesline looked great. The Doomsday Bulldog from both Steiners looked fantastic. I mean, they were really laying it into the Nasty Boys. Reminded me of some of their New Japan stuff from close to the same time. I mean, just the way they were laying in the offense, not necessarily saying the entire match structure or anything. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. And to me, it was actually a great match and a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, you had it much higher than me. Wow.
Yeah, I had it more than the cage match people, more than Dave. Maybe I was just in a good mood when I watched this one, but I truly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I came in below both of those. So the post match, very interesting stuff here. So this is, I believe, the home video version, which cut some stuff. So we cut directly from the Nasties attacking after the bell and nailing with the title belts to Scott giving an interview afterward. But then he gets attacked by Jerry Sags dressed as a concession worker. That was really fucking funny. And the Nasties beat him up again. So this looks like the start of a big hot feud, right? It was supposed to be.
Right.
But in true WCW fashion, the Nasty Boys, despite being in this huge hot feud with this hot young tag team that WCW pushed endlessly, were not under contract. What the fuck? So they lost a blow-off cage match at a house show in Atlanta on November 22nd. They appeared on a taping of Pro on December 8th, beating a pair of jobbers. And then they were debuting on WWF Superstars on a taping 3 days later on December 11th. Heck of a job as always, WCW. How do you not have these guys under contract before you start this big hot feud?
Yeah,
Just
it makes
classic WCW.
Right, makes zero sense. And it seemed like it was going to be a great feud, which is crazy to say for a Nasty Boys feud. But this match was great. The post-match angle, as you said, I'm so glad you talked about it, was fantastic.
He really did look like a concession worker.
Right.
I was like, what?
No, I was like, why did he weirdly have a concession worker framed on the side of this? And then he turns around with the bad beard and the outfit, and you're like, oh, fantastic. This is great.
Yeah.
And then, so it was a great post-match attack. And then, like you said, bye-bye Nasty Boys just a couple months later. And that was that, unfortunately.
The next show we got here was Halloween Havoc 91. October 27th, 91, from the UTC Arena in Chattanooga, Tennessee. A claimed attendance of 8,900. This did a pay-per-view buy rate of 0.8. Now, there's really nothing on the show that I'm like, damn, I wish we'd gotten that. I'm very happy we didn't get the Chamber of Horrors, because it's really horrible, and there's really not much to say about it, besides it's horrible. I mean, if you look at this card, this is like near the bottom of WCW. I mean, they've run Ric Flair out of town. He's with the WWF now, and the Dangerous Alliance stuff that's gonna like turn the company around. Like, it really just starts on this show. So obviously, the promo from Paulie Dangerous on the show is very classic. The debut of Rick Rude as the Halloween Phantom is classic, but that's a 1:27 match. I mean, it's not anything special to match. But like, as far as like, that would kind of save the company into 92. But like, make the company a lot more watchable again, at least. But it obviously has no effect on this show. So this show is still filled with like, Van Hammer winning a squash in 1:13. The squash match we got here, which was Bill Kazmaier beating Oz in 3:59. I mean, that's the kind of shit that's on this show. Maybe it would have been fine. Maybe it would have been fun to get Austin versus Dustin Rhodes, the TV title. They went to a 15-minute draw. But like, the main event is, Lex Luger against Ron Simmons in a 2 out of 3 falls match. I mean, whoop-de-doo. And the semi-main is the Enforcers, Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko, defending the WCW World Tag Team titles against the WCW Patriots, Firebreaker, Chip, and Todd Champion.
I'm so glad you mentioned the semi-main as well, because I was going to have to if you didn't.
They look like fucking strippers. They look like, strippers in like a soldier and a fucking fireman outfit. I mean, they were really horrible. And like, I'm trying to think of what else to say about that. I mean, like, weren't they the ones who were like announced as their hometown was like WCW Special Forces or something? Which, yes. How is that a hometown?
No.
What does that even mean? Why does WCW have an army? Are they trying to take over the world or something? Like, I don't understand. What the fuck? It's like private armies are for villains in James Bond movies. What are you guys doing? But yeah, I mean, it would have been kind of cool, I guess, maybe to get the light heavyweight title match, Flying Brian against Richard Morton with Alexandra York from the York Foundation, because she had a computer that told her how to tell her wrestlers how to win, and yet their wrestlers never won. If you don't know who Alexandra York is, by the way, it's Terry Reynolds, so it makes it even funnier. But yeah, just a lot of 1991 WCW, not very good. The Dangerous Alliance would turn things around in 92. But yeah, anything you want to mention on the show before I get into the match we actually got?
I mean, I can't help but say I wouldn't have minded talking about the Chamber of Horrors match. I know you think there's nothing to talk about it, but I think it's just so WCW, and not in as negative of a way as most so WCW is. And to be honest with how humdrum most of the rest of the show is, I think it sadly probably was the highlight of this particular event. But yeah, outside of that, I think there have been a couple of other matches that would have been somewhat fun to watch. You named them already, but yeah, I don't think there was any hope for a big winner to come out of this draw.
So Oz, of course, is Kevin Nash. So now, okay, he started out his career just barely over a year earlier in WCW. That was his first wrestling of any kind, according to Cage Match at least. So he started out as Master Blaster Steel, as one half of the Master Blasters. Now, the original Master Blasters was Nash and some guy named Corey Pendervis, who was Master Blaster Iron. He retired after doing all of 7 matches with Nash. Apparently, that was it for him. So then he was replaced by Al Green, who did go on to a somewhat longer career. And Al Green was Master Blaster Blade. Remember they brought Al Green to face Nash in like 1998 or something. And they're like, oh, it's Nash's former partner. And I'm like, who the fuck would even remember that? It was very weird. But yes, Al Green, Master Blaster Blade. And that was the rest of the Master Blaster run. That wasn't that long, though. Only September 1990 until March 91. Now, towards the end of that run, Nash also briefly appeared as Dr. X. I was like, what the fuck is that gimmick? Unfortunately,
I don't remember that one at all, actually.
So the reason why I don't remember it, there's no photos or anything because it only happened on some house shows in March and April of 91. Okay. So it was not even really between the Master Blaster and Oz because he was also appearing as Master Blaster at the same time on some house shows and like even on TV and stuff. But yeah, Dr. X only happened on house shows according to Cage Match. So I would love to see Kevin Nash as Dr. X. If you were there in March or April of 1991, you have to see something no one else on the earth ever got to see. But yes, Dr. X. That was also Nash. And then he was repackaged as the Great and Powerful Oz in May of 1991. Now, if you've never seen like peak Oz, this is not it. Because originally he had this he had the giant mask and like the fucking the Grand Wizard, right? That's his manager, I think that they called him, which is funny because there already was a Grand Wizard of wrestling,
right?
But yeah, the gimmick at this point, it barely exists. I mean, he is just a guy in green pants with like weird hair.
Right. The great and powerful part had been taken away from the character at this point. And yeah, the entrance was stripped down from the entourage and the light show and the fog machine too.
He is a jobber in green pants at this point. That is it.
So he might as well have been, I was just gonna say he might as well have been introduced as and in the other corner.
Yeah. So he gets an entrance here, but I mean it's just nothing. I mean he just comes out. So yeah, I mean this is towards the end of the gimmick. He's gonna get repackaged as Vinny Vegas. January 21st, 92. And he will keep that gimmick for the rest of his WCW career and then finally departs the company in June of 93 and then debuts as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard Diesel, right around the same time. I mean, his first official match as Diesel is August 13th, but I think he was on TV for weeks before that. So the other guy here, Bill Kazmaier, probably a name that's not as familiar to people as Kevin Nash. So he was like a really, really accomplished powerlifter. He won a lot of World's Strongest Man's contests. I mean, he won the World's Strongest Man 3 straight years from 80 through 82. He tried out for football in the 80s and didn't make it. And he's basically just this big, strong guy. And, I think there was a quote I read that like he was the 3rd strongest man who ever lived or something behind Mark Henry and then some other guy I'd never heard of. So I didn't write down the other guy's name. I'm sorry to that man. But yeah, he started in professional wrestling with Stampede in 1986 and 87. He got a WWF tryout match in 86, but he was not signed. And then he had a long gap in his pro wrestling career. He competed in a lot more strongman tournaments and did more powerlifting. He finally returned to wrestling with, of all things, Fighting Network rings in May 1991. He appeared on the very first show in history with the Akira Maeda led newborn UWF offshoot. Now, to talk about the Patreon, I went into a lot of detail on the Patreon in the Tokyo Dome series on how the newborn UWF split and all the different fucking offshoots. The newborn UWF is the second UWF. So all the different offshoots that came from it, UWFI, Rings, Fujiwara Gumi, and Fujiwara Gumi would eventually birth Pancrase. And Rings, started out here when Bill Kazmaier appeared. Rings was still just another shoot style wrestling company, like a UWF type company. But within a few years, I believe 4 or 5 years, Rings would become a legitimate MMA company. So, they were doing actual shoot fights. But yeah, so Kazmaier was on the semi-main event of the very, very first Rings show. He lost to a guy named Chris Dolman, who would end up being a Rings regular for the next 5 years or so. And then a few months after that Rings appearance, he debuted in WCW as Rick Steiner's replacement partner in August of 91, while his brother Scott was out for about 4 months with an injury. I couldn't find any details on the exact injury, but it looks like he was only out for about June 15th until October. In fact, his return match was the infamous Chamber of Horrors match on this very show. So talk about a return match. It's like, yeah, Scott, you're back. Get in the ring, get in the Chamber of Horrors. But yeah, Kazmaier and Rick, they went all the way to the finals of a tournament to name the new World Tag Team Champions after Scott and Rick were stripped of the titles due to Scott's injury. They lost to the enforcers of Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko. That was September 5th at Clash 16 Fall Brawl. And then Kazmaier got some World Heavyweight title shots against Lex Luger during the fall of 91, only at house shows though. And after this, he wrapped up his WCW career teaming with, of all people, Jushin Thunder Liger in the Lethal Lottery at Starrcade. They did win that match. They moved on to the Battle Bowl, which was like all the Lethal Lottery winning teams then competed in Battle Bowl, the Battle Royal at the end. And Sting won that to set up Sting taking the world title from Lex Luger at Super Brawl, we covered that match, didn't we? Sting beating Luger. Did we get that one?
Now I'm trying to remember.
I think we might have.
Let's say yes. Someone can correct us if we're wrong.
But yeah, maybe Liger liked him because then somehow Kazmaier got booked on the January 4th, 92 Tokyo Dome show for New Japan against Shinya Hashimoto. And he, of course,
Have you ever
lost.
seen that match out of curiosity?
I've never seen it. Why? Is it really good?
Oh, no. It's by far the worst Hashimoto match I've ever seen. All due to his opponent, to be fair to him. And then
he was not good.
Yeah. And then after Hashimoto won with his DDT, as soon as he got off of him for the cover, Kazmaier just popped right back up and exited the ring like nothing happened.
He had to protect his career. But that ended up being his last pro wrestling match ever. So there you go. He never wrestled again after losing to Hashimoto. But yeah, and they were going to talk about the Tokyo Dome during this match, which is kind of funny. But yeah, this match here, Oz and Kazmaier. So in what's going to become a theme, they reused the exact same spooky house graphic from 1990 for the opening of the 91 Halloween Havoc, just with different wrestlers.
Gotta save money where you can.
Nash, he looks just fucking thrilled to be walking out here in his green robe. Bill Kazmaier, he is introduced as the world's strongest human being instead of man. I don't know if that was a royalties thing or a political correctness thing. I have no idea. I mean, WCW did a lot of weird shit in the early 90s, like where it couldn't be a foreign object, had to be an international object. So I don't know. And then because WCW, Bill Kazmaier carries a giant globe to the ring. Masters of subtlety, this WCW. It's really something. According to Tony, this was supposed to be Kazmaier versus Cactus Jack. No explanation for why it was changed, but there you go.
I think it wasn't
because of Chamber of Horrors.
Yeah, he was a last-minute substitute into the Chamber of Horrors match.
Who did he substitute for? I wonder.
I can't, because I think there was multiple substitutes for the Chamber of Horrors match, like right before it aired as WCW. So I'm not going to try to rehash that, but I'm pretty sure he was one of the last-minute subs.
So the crowd could not give less of a fuck about these two giant men fighting. They don't care that Kazmaier is the strongest man in the world. They don't care that Oz is 7 feet tall and a wizard. They just sit there fucking sitting on their hands. I mean, I can't say this match is very exciting. It was pretty horrible, but like I was not expecting the crowd to be this dead. They didn't care at all. Match is very bad. They can't even brawl into the corner correctly. They're just very slow, very clunky, don't work together well at all. Probably not a good idea to put two guys who are this green in the ring together, but I guess there's only 4 minutes. But yeah, the announcers are so entertained by this match. They spend a while talking about how Oz was just wrestling in Japan. I believe he had just lost to Hashimoto too, right? That would have been 90.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, there's a famous match for Oz and Hashimoto, I think from Yokohama Arena, where Hashimoto... if I remember correctly, that did a lot to help get Hashimoto over, which is hilarious because obviously beating Oz really meant nothing at this point. I mean, he was a joke, but to New Japan fans, I guess all they saw was, Hashimoto against this 7-foot tall American superstar, and Hashimoto beat him pretty easily, and that helped him get over. Apparently, that's the story I always heard. But yeah, so they're talking. The announcers here, they're just talking about how Oz was wrestling in Japan, and they're saying, "Oh, he's going back in January." And they talk about how New Japan put their tickets on sale for their January 4th Tokyo Dome show and already sold $1.5 million worth of tickets. So really putting over New Japan here for whatever reason.
No, I was really impressed by how much they were putting over New Japan.
There's like, I felt like there's this undercurrent of, well, boy, things are going great over there. Not here, but that's what it felt like. That, of course, would be the first January 4th Dome show in history. It's not the first Dome show ever. It's the first January 4th one, because the first Dome show was April 24th, 89, also from New Japan. But yeah, that January 4th, 92 Dome show they're talking about here is the Riki Choshu, Tatsumi Fujinami original double gold dash for the IWGP Heavyweight and Greatest 18 Club that, of course, we covered on the Patreon. Meanwhile, though, Lex Luger would beat Masahiro Chono to retain the WCW title in the semi-main, and there were other WCW wrestlers on that card, too. The match here, Kaz gets Oz up in the torture rack, and Oz quickly submits. It fucking sucked. It was short. It's really about the only positive thing you can say about it. I went dud on this one.
So I will be saving my dud for a match coming up later.
Oh, I have multiple duds. multiple duds to give out.
Oh, man. For this one, I will say, this was probably the most dead I've seen a WCW crowd from this era. It was almost unbelievable how quiet they were, just to echo what you said earlier. A couple of other positives I will point out was, for how brutal a lot of their spots were, they actually worked a pretty nice belly-to-back suplex spot out of the corner by Nash. So
that's fair.
That was something. And then I was really surprised to see Kazmaier skin the cat back into the ring at one point. So I gave a quarter of a star for those two spots. And I am ready to move on.
Halloween Havoc 1992 is up next. The Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal show. And yes, we got 90, 91, and 92 all in a row. It happens. What do you want me to tell you? This was October 25th, 92 from the Philadelphia Civic Center with a claimed attendance of 7,000 and a pay-per-view buy rate of 0.9. Because people were really into that Sting, Jake Roberts, spin the wheel, make the deal thing. Now in WCW's infinite wisdom, I don't know if the story, I've heard some people say they didn't gimmick the wheel. They let it be really shoot random, or that they just thought they didn't want to give away a bigger match. They gimmicked it and had it land on the most boring one, which, yes, they had it land on a coal miner's glove match, which is just a fucking glove on a pole, and Sting would beat him in 10:34 to win that match. Because apparently I don't see how Theory 2 could have been it, because apparently they already knew they weren't going to use Jake Roberts again. Like, he was just, so out of it at this point that, they just weren't going to use him. So I don't know. It was, it's weird that they were saving it, but
yeah, I think it was a weird combination. Despite how well known WCW is making poor decisions at any point during its run, I just cannot genuinely believe that they used a non-gimmicked wheel for this in the first place. And so I think maybe it was just they were down on Roberts anyways, and they're like, maybe they did something stupid like, we'll punish him then on his way out by putting him in a bad match that won't even succeed. Because that's more WCW, right? That's more WCW's type of stupidity than using an ungimmicked wheel, maybe.
But yeah, this is another show where there's a Ricky Steamboat versus Flying Brian match. I guess I would have been cool to get, but
that's a fun little match. I remember it's nothing major, but it's a fun match where Pillman was working more heel and Steamboat was in there with someone that had a quickness advantage, which you didn't always see. So I do remember enjoying that.
There's a Rick Rude and Masahiro Chono match that I remember is quite boring, actually, but it would have been fun just to see Chono. But yeah, I don't know. My Alexa thing is telling me about a refund. Thank you. But yeah, it's not a great show. So, I mean, there really isn't that many options. And we probably got one of the better matches, actually. So, the match we got was the WCW US Heavyweight title, no DQ. Big Van Vader, not the champion. We'll get into that in a second. Defending his not title against Nikita Koloff, I should say. Nikita Koloff successfully in 11:35. So, oh boy, where to start with this? First of all, the same spooky house intro again. Why? 3 years in a row. It finally doesn't open Halloween Havoc in 93, though, because that's the infamous werewolf Tony Schiavone mini movie, which we talked about that last year. I don't have to talk about that again. But yeah, the same fucking spooky house graphic again. So Rude.
They kept updating the ghost. What else do you want from them?
Yeah, that's it, I guess. So Rude has been U.S. champion for almost a year at this point. He won the belt soon after his debut at last year's Halloween Havoc. That was where the infamous WCW Halloween Phantom defeated Z-Man and then unmasked as Rick Rude at the start of the Dangerous Alliance. Yeah, he beat Sting on November 19th, 91 at Clash of Champions 17. He would never lose the title. He would be stripped of it at the end of 92 after suffering an injury. That's not the career-ending injury. The career-ending injury came in May of 93 in an NWA World Title match when he was wrestling Sting at Wrestling Dontaku for New Japan, the Fukuoka Dome, and he landed like on the corner of the elevated rampway. You know, the elevated ramp they always have at New Japan shows. Like he landed on the corner of it, taking a back body drop from Sting, and severely injured his back. So I guess very similar to what happened with Shawn Michaels in the casket in 98. But yeah, Dustin Rhodes would go on to become the next U.S. champion. He would also be stripped of the title after he and Rick Rude had a bunch of title matches with inconclusive finishes in 93. And that made 2 straight champions and never lost the belt in the ring. But then Dustin would get the belt back after being stripped of it anyway. So I don't know what the point of it was, really. But to make things even more confusing here, Big Van Vader is filling in for Rick Rude. So basically, Bill Watts, who was shoot running WCW at the time, he would lose that job towards the end of 92 due to comments he made in the Pro Wrestling Torch. You remember that whole thing, right? With the interview with,
yes.
He basically
absolutely brutal. The open racism spouted by him.
And, Rude is basically so Watts comes out and says, basically, Rude is challenging Chono for the NWA title later in the night. He was originally supposed to have to wrestle 2 matches here, also defend the U.S. title against Nikita Koloff. But Paulie dangerously and his evil lawyers got some kind of injunction to let Vader defend the U.S. title in his place. Okay. I mean, sure, whatever. Very confusing, very weird storyline.
It doesn't really make sense. And also, I mean, it's low on the grand scale of things for WCW, but the fact that they were hyping it in advance as, here's this really hated heel we've been building super strong for over a year now, or for exactly a year, and you'll have to, he'll have to wrestle twice in one night. Like, this is his comeuppance. And then on the pay-per-view, it's like, oh, never mind, he outsmarted us. He's only having to wrestle once.
He gets to have somebody else defend his title. Sure.
And not just someone else, but Vader.
Yeah, Vader, who's like the unbeatable monster at this point. He's like right in between 2 world title reigns. Like Vader, he lost the world title to Ron Simmons on an episode of Main Event at the start of August, and he would win the belt back from Simmons almost exactly 2 months after this, a house show in Baltimore on December 30th. So like, he's just been world champion. He's going to be world champion again soon. I mean, this is like peak Vader, and he gets to come, and Rude gets to get him to defend his title. So Koloff is in his one of his final runs here, is now residing in the United States of America period. He is so popular. I always forget like how over as a face the now residing in the USA period was. I mean, the crowd fucking loves him. They were like, they are very into this Russian man. So way to go for not being xenophobic. 1992 WCW crowds, I guess.
Right. Yeah. For his couple face runs with WCW, he always got great crowd support, surprisingly enough. And he's just one of those wrestlers. I think his career ended just a little too early for a lot of today's fans to remember just how over he was.
Yeah.
Both as a heel and a face.
So Vader, he mauls Koloff early on with his punches in the corner. Hits this huge clothesline that Koloff takes a great flip bump for. And they fight out to the floor. Vader drops Koloff on the railing, nails him with a chair. Some fan throws a beer at Vader as he's like turning around. It bounces right off of him. I'm not even sure he noticed. Just kind of funny. He just doesn't react at all. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah, but I did appreciate Jesse pointing out how stupid that fan was, because Vader might kick his ass later.
Koloff tries to sunset flip Vader back into the ring, but Vader simply hits the big avalanche down onto him. Looks like it killed him. Koloff's selling this match was really good. Like he's selling like he is in there with a monster and cannot do anything. Just really, really good selling here. Like he's selling like he's getting killed in every move. Vader splashes Koloff off the second rope. Koloff just barely kicks out. Then we get a very long headlock from Vader. Koloff finally stands up still in the headlock. Tries to hit a backchop suplex on him. Vader, like, won't go up. And they sort of just, like, awkwardly land back on the mat. Almost like Koloff's head gets snapped. Looked weird and kind of bad. It does break the headlock. And then Koloff just barely gets Vader up for a front suplex. That didn't look very good either. And then Koloff finally gets some actual offense, including a big body slam for a 2 count. They end up on the outside again. Koloff misses the Russian sickle lariat with Vader up against the post, and Koloff crashes into it hard with his arm instead. And then back in the ring, Vader finishes Koloff off without much trouble, drops a few elbows, and hits the big powerbomb for the win. So this was another match that started out really hot, just like Steiner's and Nasty Boys for me, but just couldn't quite maintain that momentum. I thought it was going to be a really fun power battle, and Vader beating the shit out of Koloff indeed was a lot of fun. But that headlock felt like it went on forever. Koloff's comeback was like weird and clunky. Almost looked like Vader was being like uncooperative or something at first. The powerbomb to end it was great though. So I don't know. I went 3 1/4. I thought it was pretty good. I thought Vader killing him at the start was a lot of fun. And even the parts that like weren't great weren't horrible or anything. So, this ended up being my match of the show, basically. So I liked it. But, it's another match where like it started off like it was going to be really good and ended up just being pretty good. So
Kings Island is issuing a fear warning for the city of Cincinnati and the surrounding areas. Halloween Haunt will make landfall on September 24th and is expected to induce terror until the 30th of October. All patrons are advised to take caution. Unspeakable horrors are among us, and there's no hope of escape. Halloween Haunt, fear is waiting for you.
Come and get it.
Halloween Haunt admission is included with your Gold Pass or buy a ticket at visitkingsisland.com.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this match as well. I think you captured the essence of it really well. I will say this does start a trend for matches we have rest of the night where there's a momentum change where one of the wrestlers accidentally hits the ring post outside of the ring while trying to either lariat or punch or chop their opponent. Yeah, I think the clunkiness at the end, if I'm remembering correctly, which is sometimes a question these days, I'm pretty sure Nikita legit injured his neck in this match, which caused this to be his last televised match, I think. And he probably retired shortly after, if I'm remembering everything correctly. So I thought the beginning was great. Their strikes, and like you said, Nikita selling to get over just how dangerous Vader was. But him having just enough power and speed to kind of hang in there. But then unfortunately, the match did get a little clunky. The powerbomb at the end looked vicious, but assuming my memory is right about the neck injury, I think also Nikita getting dumped on his shoulder and neck at that point probably did not feel great. But yeah, it was probably my second best match of the night behind the Nasty Boy Steiner's match earlier, and I also had a 3 1/4.
there you go. We had the exact same rating finally. There you go. Sorry, I'm just responding to something from work because I'm doing this on my work day. But yeah, so there you go. That's that match. Anything else to say about that match really quick before we move on to the next year's?
I'm just glad we had a chance to talk about Nikita and Vader. Wasn't a great match, but compared to what we have coming, it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's true. So then we move on to 94. That's the next one we got here. October 23rd, 94. From the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. This did an 0.97 buy rate. So a little bit of a higher buy rate here in the Hogan era. And Hogan, of course, would main event against Ric Flair in a cage match. I'm sad we didn't get that because that has a 4.25 from Dave, only a 6.74 from Cage Match. I don't remember it at all, so it would have been fun. I know I've seen it, but I don't remember it at all. So it would have been fun to see, who was right there. Is it did Dave really overrated at the time? What's the deal? But yeah, I don't know. That would have been fun to get, I guess.
Yeah, that was the Mr. T guest referee match, if I believe correct. Yeah. I think that was a fairly fun match. I have not probably seen it since the 90s, but so most of those Hogan Flair matches in his initial run were fun enough. I don't think any of them were great from how I remember them, but 3.5-ish stars, maybe reflecting back. But they also kind of had the diminishing returns of just Hogan's push becoming obvious and Flair just not having a chance in any of them. And so they introduce things like the retirement step, and still just Flair loses.
There you go. So the Halloween Havoc 94. I mean that. So when Flair retires, right, he comes back as in drag, right? Is that his next appearance when he appears in dressed as a woman at Uncensored 95? I think
that sounds right. Yes.
Yeah, during the Vader Hogan strap match. So odd, obviously.
Yes, I mean WCW.
But yeah, the match we got here was Dustin Rhodes beating Arn Anderson with Colonel Robert Parker and Meng in 950. It got a 3.25 from the Observer, a 6.18 on Cage Match, and both of those I thought were a little high, as I'll get to in a second. So this match came about as a result of a feud when Dustin Rhodes, he's up against Colonel Robert Parker's stud stable, and he's like, I know who I should team with, Arn Anderson. Anderson, of course, was like, no. He turns on him in July at Bash of the Beach. I mean, he even told him, you're going to get the old...
This is the one, where Anderson basically warns him to his face, like, I will do this, but I'm going to turn on you and kick your ass.
And he's like,
that's what happened.
He flat out tells him, you're going to get the old Arn Anderson who would kick his own mother for $1 or something. And Dustin's like, sign me up. That sounds great. And like, what are you moron? The final payoff for this, though, would be Dustin bringing in his daddy, Dusty Rhodes, for tag matches against the stud stable in November. So the funniest part of the match is right at the start where Arn keeps repeatedly accusing Dustin Rhodes of pulling his almost non-existent hair, which finally gets a very exasperated Dustin to explode with, come on, ref, I ain't pulling his damn hair. It's pretty funny when the ref actually does try to warn him. To be honest, I just found this match pretty boring. Arn beats Dustin down for what felt like ages, and then Arn nearly pins Dustin holding onto the ropes on a sunset flip. The referee kicks him, or catches him and kicks his arms away, and then Dustin just kind of lays on him for the finish while he's arguing with the ref. Kind of a stupid finish to boot. I don't know. I mean, I normally like both guys, but this match really did nothing for me. With the stupid finish, I actually think it's a little below average. So, I barely have any notes because there wasn't anything to it to me. I went 2.25. Didn't even feel like much of a grudge match to me either after Arn turned on him. I mean, I guess it wasn't really the blow off since, Arn lays him out afterwards, which sets up all those tags with Dusty and Dustin. But I just wasn't into this at all. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and just to add to the context as well, I don't think the crowd was that into it either. And I think a part of the weirdness was they had the War Games match before this as well, the stud stable versus Dustin Rhodes and Dusty, right? I think I'm remembering that right at Fall Brawl.
Oh, you're right. I guess that already happened. Yeah.
Right. And that was like, so that should have been the feud blow off. I mean, it's War Games. And then Dustin and Arn were just back out at the next pay-per-view wrestling a singles match with no stipulations. And so I think that kind of hurt just the feel and the flow of the match as well. I did enjoy a lot of Arn's work in the match, like a lot of the small things he was doing. I thought he showed some good familiarity with Dustin and showing that I guess it was a long-term feud and, baiting Dustin in a couple times and outsmarting him and just the way he moved around the ring in general. But to me, it felt like more of like a really good, or maybe not really good, but a really fun Saturday night's main event style match than a pay-per-view match of a supposedly really hot feud. Dustin did take one, I thought, a really good bump over the top rope when he charged at Arn at one point, and Arn ducked out of the way. That was, good for him on that. The finish, though, definitely came off clunkier than it should have. And again, it was just quick. And then immediately, Arn attacked afterwards to extend the feud again after they'd had a War Games match already the previous month. So just felt like a lot of spinning the wheels. And so, yeah, I gave 2 3/4 stars. So a little bit higher than you, mostly for some of Arn's work in the match, but definitely not anything great.
There you go. Just not anything I was that into either. So a lot more to talk about though with the following year, which was Halloween Havoc 1995, back at the Joe Louis Arena from Detroit, Michigan, 13,000 people, and only an 0.6 buy rate though. But this was this is kind of a historic show because in a lot of ways it's kind of the start of like the Crash TV era almost. Like it's kind of Russo before Russo with all the fucking wacky turns and twists and turns here.
That's a good way of putting it that I hadn't thought of before. I just thought of it as like Hogan desperation to be over and relevant. But you're right. It did take a lot of elements of what Russo would become well known for later.
Now, I will say, the darkside Hogan thing, I forgot how well it worked. Like, he was popular here. I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, no, the crowd was definitely behind him, which I did not expect going in. My memory did not retain that.
Because they have to turn him heel, obviously, in 96 because the crowd is no longer with him. And, you can go back and watch that stuff in 96, the Super Brawl and everything else and see, just how much the crowd is not with him. But, this is not that long before that. And the crowd is still with him here. So it is.
Maybe it was the finish to this match that finally killed it. Who knows?
But yeah, the darkside Hogan thing was kind of over. So, so we got the main event here, which was the Giant defeating the Hulk Hogan by DQ in 1657. The WCW World Heavyweight title could change hands via DQ match, which was not known at the time, as we'll get into. Very convoluted. I wish we had gotten Sabu versus Jerry Lynn, because that would have been real what the fuck. I should have mentioned, by the way, so 94 was the first show we got last time. So the last time we did 94, we got Vader versus the Guardian Angel. And for 95, the last time we got Ming against Lex Luger, which really wasn't very good either. So, and that went 13 minutes somehow. So, yikes. But yeah, I wish we had gotten Sabu against Jerry Lynn. I went and watched it just for the fucking hell of it. Because it's like, what the fuck, Sabu in WCW? It's just as crazy you would assume a 3-minute Sabu match would be in 95. But yeah, a lot to get into here. So, okay. That DQ stipulation was not revealed until Nitro the following night. Because it was revealed that Jimmy Hart double-crossed Hogan before the match. He's going to double-cross him in the match, obviously. And put that clause in the contract for this match. So in theory, this made Giant the new champion. But in actuality, it was just a way for them to have the belt vacated with controversy. And so it could be put on the line in the very first World War III Battle Royal in November, which Randy Savage would win. They used the same fucking haunted house graphic from all those previous years in the opening video. I was like, after 93 got rid of it, they brought it back. What the fuck? Why did they bring that haunted house graphic back?
This time they had the really weird prose about how the Giant has been haunting Hogan. And I almost went back to transcribe it because it was that out there and weird. But then I was like, no, I'm not watching that again.
Now, I watched the Sumo Monster Truck battle just to be thorough. I don't know if you watched that or not.
So did I. I'm so glad you did.
So, yes, besides their wrestling match, Hogan and the Giant each got in a monster truck on the roof of Cobo Hall, which is, I guess, next door to Joe Louis Arena. And
convention center. Or I was just saying, it's like the big convention center in Detroit, right next to Joe Louis.
So they're on the roof of this thing. They're in a big circle. There's random things to explode. One of them does explode, apparently. And the two trucks are welded together, and one truck is trying to push the other one all the way out of the truck. They're all the way out of the circle. They make it very clear. Both axles, both sets of wheels have to cross the line to win, because Giant at one point does push Hogan's monster truck like halfway out, but it doesn't count apparently.
I thought the Giant won on that. It looked like it was all out, and they were just trying to cover for Hogan.
It was raining in Detroit. It's very wet up on there on the roof. It looks both dangerous and yet also boring. It's two trucks slowly pushing each other back and forth. Definitely not the most exciting television. Hogan does finally win, of course. God forbid that man do a job, even in a monster truck sumo match, I guess. Giant gets out of the truck. He's very mad. He chases Hogan to the side of the roof, starts choking him. They fight up on a ledge. Hogan, moves his arms up to get the Giant's arms off of him, and Giant goes, whoa! Waves his arms around, and then falls off the side of the fucking building to his apparent death. Hogan, tries to reach for him, which that was a good touch. And then he gives out one really funny, oh no.
Right.
That sounds very unconvincing.
That's what I was going to say. It's the most unconcerned, oh no, someone help, imaginable.
He runs off for help. Now, they show the river, I guess saying Giant fell in there. I'm almost positive the river was not actually touching Cobo Hall. I think they made that up.
Yes. There's no way he would have landed in the river from there.
Yeah, he would have landed on the parking lot.
Also, he would have been seriously injured falling into the river from there, if not killed. It's high enough.
He's still not good to fall into rivers from that high now. So Hogan comes out in his strange pre-Hollywood darkside attire that looks almost exactly like the NWO attire he would start wearing in midway through '96. So it's very weird to see in hindsight. But he also does have this Taskmaster style painting on his head. That just looks very funny.
Yeah, that was so weird. I don't know if that was supposed to be his way of trying to psych out the Giant since, the Taskmaster was with him, but that was odd.
Yeah. Now he burns that attire at World War III the following month in the same famous promo to open that show where he burns a copy of the Wrestling Observer and declares the internet is where they have all the scoops, which is one of the... You remember that promo?
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the wackiest promos of all time. But yeah, so Hogan comes out here. He's in his black attire. So is Jimmy Hart's in black too. But Hogan's making his I'm sad face. Very funny. He's sad because he accidentally killed a man. But then the Giant just walks out. Tony, as the Giant walks out, Tony Schiavone very casually just says, he's risen from the dead. With all the emotion I just delivered that line with. He knows this is stupid. He can't make it sound believable. So he just says it as matter of fact as possible. He's risen from the dead.
And that becomes kind of a reoccurring theme through the match from both him and Heaton, where, because not to spoil what you're going to say in a few short minutes, but there's a lot of downtime in this match. And so there'd be an awkward silence, and then one of them would be like, well, I don't know how Hogan's going to win. Apparently, the Giant can't be killed.
Hogan makes his very funny shocked face. I thought this man was dead. This is so fucking funny. Giant, he very slowly beats on the Hulkster. He chokes him in the corner. We get a very long test of strength. Really thrilling stuff. Now, I have to say, this match sucks. But the crowd fucking loves it. You do have to say that.
Yeah.
They love this fucking match. Hogan's very basic comeback. They're going fucking crazy. The reaction when Hogan hits some clotheslines, eventually knocks the Giant over the top rope. They make a huge reaction for that, even though Giant selling is horrible. I'm not trying to pick on Paul White. This is his second match ever. His first match was for something called the WWA, for the WWA heavyweight title, where he lost to a guy named Frank Finnegan. By count out at the Route 30 Mall in Clementon, New Jersey on December 3rd, 1994. Don't know why he worked that show, but he did.
I think it's actually his third match ever. Are we already forgetting the Monster Truck Sumo match?
Oh, that's true.
I'm just kidding.
So Giant comes back from that, though. He puts Hogan in a very long bear hug. I mean, very long. It feels like it goes on forever. Yes. Hogan finally fights his way out. He runs right into a chokeslam from the Giant. Giant covers, but Hogan, of course, kicks out and he hulks up, hits some punches, hits the big boot. Giant still won't go down, so Hogan rakes his eyes and then finally hits the body slam on him. Jimmy Hart, though, he turns off camera, takes out the ref, so great job by the camera crew. He takes out the ref just as Hogan hits the leg drop. Jimmy feigns innocence, but then he shoves the referee down, hits Hogan in the back with the world title belt. Hogan, of course, completely no-sells it, but Giant saves Jimmy Hart. He puts Hogan back in the bear hug. Luger and Savage run out next. Okay. So they have been doing like a weird thing where you couldn't trust Luger, right? That was the whole thing.
Yep.
And Luger and Savage Luger runs out. He's going to help Savage. Jimmy Hart nails Savage with the title belt. Savage sells it. And then Luger just starts stomping him. So he it was a weird turn, but he did turn on Savage to join up.
I think it was the most of all the post-match craziness. I thought it was the one element that kind of made sense, at least, because they were playing, still the is Luger trustworthy, and then Savage did just beat Luger in the match before this one, so at least there was, I think that turn could have worked if it wasn't in the middle of the horrible mess that was happening around it.
Speaking of horrible mess, the giant Yeti, as Tony Schiavone. Why does he call him that? Every time Tony Schiavone said the Yeti's name, he said the Yeti.
I assume he popped Bobby or someone the first time he did it and was like, all right, I'm doing that every time now.
Oh, it was so fucking funny. I mean, it must be his way of making fun of it or something, but yeah, he's like, the Yeti. So the giant Yeti, he's a for some reason he comes out of a block of ice, his name is the Yeti, but he's a mummy. I've never understood that one after all this time. So he's the future Reese from the fucking flock, I think, right?
Yep. Yes, he is.
And he comes out, he and the giant give Hogan the infamous double hump bear hug from each side. So Giant has him in the bear hug. The Yeti goes around the other side and just fucking humps him. That's what he does. I'm not even exaggerating. He grabs Hogan on the other side. He shakes his body around and acts like he's humping him. What the fuck am I watching?
My notes were Yeti comes in, gently rests his arms on the Giant's shoulders, and then gyrates his body on Hogan's back.
What the hell? This looks sexual. This did not look like a fucking painful maneuver.
Yeah.
Luger puts Hogan.
He went back to the same spot a second time, just seconds later.
Luger puts Hogan in the torture rack, and then they give Savage the same devastating double hump bulldog. I was generous. I gave this a dud because the live crowd liked it a lot, but it was pretty horrible. Michael Buffer announces the Giant is the winner by DQ. I guess that makes sense because Jimmy Hart is Hogan's manager, and he attacked the ref first. So that is logical, right?
It's one of those. Technically, it makes sense, but I don't know if it's still the angle you want to do for a wrestling audience, even if it technically makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I don't really have a problem with that part of it, I guess. But Michael Buffer does say the belt can't change hands on DQ, and Giant celebrates for the belt anyway and leaves. So I guess we don't find out about that rider in the contract that Jimmy Hart put there as part of the Giant conspiracy until the following night on Nitro. But there you go. That's how the show goes off the air, with Hogan and Savage laying there from the devastating double hump bear hug. Anything you want to say about this?
I mean, I don't know what there is to say about it a whole lot. Giant in his WCW debut is in the main event of Halloween Havoc right away. So, there's that. I will say, for this being his first real match ever, for about the first 2 to 3 minutes of the match, I thought okay, he's looking a bit more comfortable in the ring than I thought he would. This is not the worst. And then there was a really awkward, I think, a body slam spot where they just could not get on the same page at all. And it was just all immediately downhill after that. And then the most formulaic Hogan match imaginable, like it was mid-80s WWF. But also mid-80s WWF, like you said, the crowd was invested in the match the entire time. Despite how brutal it was.
I mean, if you've watched any WCW from Hogan's debut until the turn, this was not common. There were a lot of crowds where Hogan was not over with the crowd at all. I mean, that's why they turned him heel.
I was shocked. Exactly. I assumed this was another one of those audiences that were just, or from this era where every audience essentially was against him, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah,
I
thought loved him.
Yeah, I thought the announcers had a couple of interesting moments since there wasn't much going on in the match itself. I thought it was very interesting they directly referenced WrestleMania 3 a couple times in the match. in a way to build up the match itself. So mentioning the competition, not to put them down, but to try to give more context and history to the Hogan versus Giant. I also thought it was interesting. They kind of buried the Giant for being, I don't know, probably near the end of the match, being like, he kept injuring Hogan's match in the run up to this. I'm not sure why he's not attacking his neck tonight. But yeah, I mean, it was a weird match, made all the weirder because of the opening monster truck crap, excuse me. And then the Giant coming down to the ring looking, I mean, just fresh as a daisy, nowhere whatsoever.
He wasn't even wet.
Right. It's just
wasn't the idea he's thrown in the river. He wasn't even wet.
And even if he wasn't thrown into the river, it was raining quite a lot. And then
but he looked like he was dry as dry could be.
Right. It looked like he exited the river, and he only had, I think, about 10, 15 matches or 10, 15 minutes of the match. Yeah. So he exited the river, got into the building, went to the locker room, completely dried off, put on his wrestling gear, and then casually came out for his match like nothing happened.
Like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm alive.
Don't worry about it. I got this. And then, yeah, the just all the angles and turns at the end and the Yeti being involved.
I'm sorry. Excuse you. The Yeti.
Excuse me. Yes, it was too much, and it was. I mean, yeah. I'll just say, like, as a star rater, I very rarely give duds. I very rarely give 5 stars. Like, something has to be absolutely horrific to get a dud, and this one was, despite the crowd enjoyment, was easily a dud for me. The match was long and boring, with lots of awkwardness, and just the beginning and end context around the match just made it that much more unbearable. And so easy dud, lowest moment of the 6 matches we watched.
Finally, the last one we watched here was from the Halloween Havoc 1999 show, October 24th, 1999, from the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, an attendance of 8,464, a pay-per-view buy rate of 0.52, which sounds much lower than all these other ones, but compared to what the Russo era would later do, was
it's about to get much worse.
Yeah, it's about to get much worse. So yeah, this was the very first pay-per-view of the Vince Russo era. They basically took over, starting with this show. As a result, there's really not much on this show. We probably got the best one last time. We got Eddie Guerrero and Perry Saturn. So that was about as good as we could have gotten. This time we got Goldberg beating Sting in 3:08 to win the World Heavyweight title, sort of, in the main event, an unscheduled main event, which we got a lot to talk about here. So Sting, he won the WCW title from Hulk Hogan the previous month at Fall Brawl, where he turned heel on Hogan. That went over like a wet fart.
Right. Quote, first of all, turned heel.
What?
I said, quote, turned heel, because the fans didn't think he turned heel in the match.
The crowd reacted huge. Okay, so think about this. Put yourself in the fans. You're in the shoes of a WCW fan. You're someone who still cares enough about WCW to watch this promotion. You have seen Hollywood Hulk Hogan be the top heel in the company, literally try to destroy the company for 3 straight fucking years as the leader of the NWO. And now he's suddenly a babyface again for whatever reason. And the build-up is like, oh, can Sting trust Hogan not to turn on him here? The crowd, obviously, when Sting takes the bat from Luger and nails Hogan, the crowd pops huge. The crowd is like, good, give it to that fucker. He deserves it. That's basically the reaction. You can't have someone turn on Hogan after all the shit Hogan has done in the past few years. It just did not work at all. I mean, you can say Hogan's babyface all you want. He has spent the last 3 years talking about how much WCW fucking sucks. I mean, he is the heel in this company. So it just didn't work at all.
And Sting was the babyface of the company during that time.
Now, do you remember this hilarious video they aired on Nitro around that time trying to support the heel turn? Basically retconning the entire past 3 years of Sting as the top babyface in the NWO era into how he was supposedly secretly the bad guy the whole time.
Right. Like he had separated himself from everyone, and it was just constantly ambushing people with his bat, and just,
it was so absurd.
Right.
One of the most absurd videos I've ever seen. It's like, you can't retcon an entire period where he was the top babyface and make him the top heel. It was really stupid.
Well, especially for something like wrestling. This isn't like a comic book or a TV show or a movie series or whatever. Like, you have live audiences every week who know what happened. You can't just tell them like, oh yeah, we totally changed what that meant now. Please boo this guy.
The other problem, of course, was that this was all done by a booking team that was a lame duck booking team. So why the fuck they thought they needed to, do Sting as a heel and all? Like, they knew they were lame ducks already. So it was really bizarre that they did this big Sting angle. So Halloween Havoc, this is Vince Russo's first show in charge. He doesn't give a fuck that they've built up the Sting Hogan feud for the past 2 months. He has Sting and Hogan go out there and do the pin me, pay me deal. Now, what's really funny about this is everybody remembers Hogan laying down at Bash of the Beach 2000 for Jeff Jarrett the following year, not even a year later. Like, what is it, like 9 months later, 8 months later? Yeah. Everybody remembers that because of the Vince Russo promo afterward and how Hogan felt legitimately double-crossed and then became a lawsuit. Nobody remembers that they did the same fucking stupid fake shoot angle less than a year earlier with the same guy. Like, isn't that kind of insane? It feels like,
I was gonna say, just to like reinforce your point, when you first assigned this match or told me this was one of the matches we were watching, I was
I assigned nothing. I don't the randomizer assigned
yes, it. That's what I wanted to. And I was like, wait, Sting versus Goldberg for the title? Like, I didn't even remember the main event for a second. And then you mentioned, it's when Hogan laid down for Sting earlier. And then all of a sudden, like, it just came back to me. I was like, oh no. And like, but yeah, I had completely forgotten, I guess because of what Russo WCW would become in the months after. But like, somehow, like, I had just completely forgotten about both Hogan laying down and even the Sting Goldberg main event at the end of the show until you prompted it a little bit. And then I was like, oh crap, I do remember that. That was awful.
Now, the Hogan laying down thing went literally nowhere. I don't know what the original plan was, but basically, so Hogan lays down for Sting. They don't even acknowledge it because they cut right to a video package for Goldberg and Sid after that, I guess, to try to push that it's real. But Vince, whatever the plan was to bring Hogan back or do anything with Hogan based on this, I mean, Vince Russo gets turfed in January of 2000 for the first time. So Hogan just comes back and never mentions this again. He just comes back as a babyface during the brief Kevin Sullivan era before the Russo era, the Russo and Bischoff era in April. So he just comes back and they completely ignore this ever happened. So that's why I think nobody remembers it. It didn't lead to anything.
Yeah, there's no follow-up.
There's no follow-up at all. It just becomes something that happened. Goldberg, meanwhile, he had beaten Sid Vicious in a U.S. title match that they built up for like, I think 3 or 4 months of Sid Vicious doing his own fake Goldberg streak that made no sense, that like he would lose matches.
Right. Everyone he power bombed counted as a win. So I remember there was like one Nitro or Thunder or something where a bunch of jobbers ran in and he power bombed like all 12 of them. And they're like, each one is a win, and increasing the streak. And it's just like, all right, let's just calm down here.
But the point is, though, they built that match up, but it's not like, again, Vince Russo doesn't give a shit. So he has Goldberg win a 7-minute match by, quote, blood stoppage, despite the fact that Sid was barely bleeding, if I remember correctly. I didn't watch it again. Which I'm sure the people loved as a payoff after 3 months or so worth of build-up. And then they have Sting come back out after the Hogan laid down for him and issue an open challenge. He never says his title was on the line, and that ends up being his point later. And the announcers even say this is a non-title match for the match starts.
Yeah, I think they said, like, we were told by the committee or whatever, this is a non-title match. Like, make a big deal about it.
So there's no controversy. I don't know why there was ever controversy. The other thing, too, about this is, like, if you had kept with the original, like this should have been the Starrcade main event, right? Like, it felt like that's where they were leading.
Right.
Where Sting is getting the big heel push and Goldberg's getting the big babyface push. And they're like, let's just put it on Halloween Havoc with literally no bill, unannounced. Yep. On a pay-per-view people had to have already bought. It's like, wow, Vince Russo for you, everybody.
Nobody would want to pay for that.
Sting and Goldberg, they do some sloppy brawling in the ring and on the floor. Goldberg's controlling the match until he accidentally hits the ring post. Back in the ring, Sting hits an elbow drop. He hits a splash off the top rope. Then he hits a very awkward-looking spear on Goldberg. Goldberg, though, immediately no-sells it. He pops up, hits a spin kick, that only looks like it missed by about 50 feet. It's too bad the one on Bret Hart couldn't miss like that, I guess. Sting has to sell it anyway, though. But then he sidesteps a charging Goldberg in the corner. Goldberg spears the post. Sting then hits 3 straight Stinger splashes on him. Goldberg ducks under Sting. He leapfrogs, that was a really cool leapfrog. And then he hits this huge spear. That spot was pretty fucking cool, at least. And then he jackhammers Sting for the win. It's 3 minutes long. There was one cool spot. I don't know what you want from me here. I gave it a 1/4 star for the leapfrog spot, I guess.
All right. Yeah, I enjoyed this match more than you. I thought, for the circumstances of what everything was, the terrible booking around it, and again, maybe it's just the bar had been lowered so much by the previous match we watched, but I thought it was a fun enough of a sprint, and I liked Sting's splash off the top rope. I liked some of Goldberg's moves. I liked the energy Sting brought to it. This wasn't an era he was always bringing a lot of energy. So I gave it 2 stars, below average. Definitely not worthy of a main event or anything like that. I don't want to try to make it seem like, no, this was some long lost classic that was actually brilliant. Nothing like that. But I did enjoy it enough to be like, it was just kind of bad, which is more than yourself. I did think it was weird. So I was watching this on the Peacock app thing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So not, as you know, not always the easiest to navigate when you're looking for a very specific match. And so one thing I want to point out was I did catch the end of the Paige Flair match before this, which the very end of it is Paige laying out Charles Robinson with a diamond cutter and just leaving him for dead. And then at the beginning of this match, Sting makes a deal on exit ring. He's like, there's not even a referee for this. We need a referee. And Tony's like, we do need a referee. And we know it won't be Charles Robinson after what happened. And literally as he's finishing his sentence, Charles Robinson comes sprinting out of the back, perfectly fine, despite just eating DDP's finisher a minute before this. And again, just one of those very WCW feeling moments. And yeah, match ended. Buffer announced Goldberg is the new champion. I don't know if he just didn't bother reading his cards.
Yeah, so Buffer announces Goldberg. So Goldberg celebrates. The referee hands him the title. He's announced as the new champion, despite all that stuff about being non-title before the match. And there's a long pause. The announcer, Bobby Heenan, finally says, well, don't look at me. Right. And then Tony Schiavone is like, I guess he's the world champion. That about sums up, I guess. I guess he's the world champion. The following night on Nitro, Sting would rightly be like, I never said it was for the title. And for some fucking reason, instead of handing the belt back and being like, you're right, Sting, here's your title back, they vacate the title. It's one of the worst controversies I can remember.
Yeah. I think the official explanation was because he then attacked Charles Robinson after the match because Lord knows WCW champions never, ever hit a referee at any point outside of the match during this time period. This was a horrible thing that never was happening in WCW rings, and so they had to punish Sting for it.
Yeah, there you go. I forgot he gives Charles Robinson the death drop. But yeah, they strip Sting of the title. They have that horrible, 64-man tournament for the title leading up to Mayhem, where the people would advance by losing or get reinserted back into the bracket. It was seriously one of the worst tournaments of all time.
I remember Madusa was entered into it because they were looking that hard, I think, to try to fill out the bracket.
Yeah, Madusa who dumped the WCW Nitro perfume on Bobby Heenan on this show. Really funny segment. Oh, we didn't mention earlier, after that 91 match, that's the segment where after Vader beats, not 91, 92. After Vader beats Nikita Koloff, right after that, there's an interview with Vader, Harley Race, and Paul E. Dangerously, and Madusa interrupts the interview for some reason, and Paul gives that infamous firing speech on the spot where he just he's so misogynistic, and he's like, I know women don't know how to read and all this stuff, and she just kicks him right in the fucking head and beats his ass. The crowd is going crazy, and Vader and Harley Race is like, "What? We're leaving." It's one of the funniest. The funniest part of it because she kicks his ass, starts beating his ass, and these two, they were hired to do a job to defend this U.S. title.
We got our check.
We got our check. We'll see you later. They just leave while she's kicking Paul Heyman's ass. It's really fucking funny. They just they don't try to pull them off or nothing. They just fucking leave. But yeah, I forgot to mention that we talked about Vader.
I'm glad you brought that up.
But yeah, Madusa got some big moments on these shows. Kicks Paul Heyman's ass in 92, and then dumped the nitro perfume on Bobby Heenan's head in 99. So
Right, which again, it's I won't say it's nitro perfume, cologne, whatever. It's stupid.
They
Nobody
spend
cares
so much
about
time
it.
talking about how much it stinks.
Right, that's what I said. No, it's your branding, and then on your pay-per-view, you're talking about what a horrible product it is. Like, what are you doing?
They were so fucking funny. WCW, everybody. This is why I do these episodes, because they're always a good time, because this company was so insane. It was like at least if you're going to be bad, you need to be fun bad. WWE nowadays is almost never fun bad. It's just like brutally boring bad.
Yep.
Yeah, brutally boring bad. These were fun bad. I mean, there were like flashes of fun bad, like The Fiend against Seth Rollins, or pretty much anything involving The Fiend. But, anyway, so we can wrap things up here. Another Halloween Havoc Retro Roulette in the books. Might have to make this an annual tradition because there's a lot of fun. These shows were like horrible too. So there's so much to mine here.
Right.
So.
As I was looking through the cards, I was like, oh, despite some really good matches, Halloween Havoc was definitely never one of their more stellar pay-per-views.
That is for sure. All right. Anything you want to plug before you wrap things up here?
Nah, just be nice to everyone, people. Have fun. Watch some old wrestling. It's not the worst in the world.
There you go. All right. So, of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Wrestle Omakase. Wrestling would not fit. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. Not next week, because, again, every other week. So probably Sunday, November 14th, I'll be talking about the AEW Full Gear pay-per-view and New Japan Battle in the Valley, their U.S. show from that weekend. So both those shows take place on Saturday the 13th. So it's kind of a big weekend, I guess. And we'll talk about both those shows. I don't have a guest yet, so we'll see. But I have a few people I feel like I could ask. So anyway, that'll be in 2 weeks, our next episode here on the free feed. And again, the Patreon, if you somehow fast forwarded through everything or something, the Patreon is on hiatus. So the next time you hear from me will be in about 2 weeks for the Full Gear and Battle in the Valley review. In the meantime, I want to thank you for listening as always, and we will see you next time.
Kings Island is issuing a fear warning for the city of Cincinnati and the surrounding areas. Halloween Haunt will make landfall on September 24th and is expected to induce terror until the 30th of October. All patrons are advised to take caution. Unspeakable horrors are among us, and there's no hope of escape. Halloween Haunt, fear is waiting for you.
Come and get it.
Halloween Haunt admission is included with your Gold Pass or buy a ticket at visitkingsisland.com.